Galactic Council chamber was built to intimidate. It floated in the void between stars, a massive structure of dark metal and glowing energy fields that had witnessed the submission of 400 species over 3,000 years. Inside the main hall, representatives from dozens of worlds sat in tiered seats that rose like the walls of a canyon, all of them looking down at the small platform in the center where new species stood to hear their fate. Today that platform held 3 humans. Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the middle, flanked by her diplomatic officer and her chief engineer. She wore a simple uniform with no medals, no decorations, nothing that suggested Earth thought this moment required ceremony. Her face was calm. Her hands were steady. She had been warned that the council would try to make her feel small, and she had decided weeks ago that she would not give them the satisfaction. Above her, Council Speaker Tharn rose from his seat. He was a kilos tall and covered in blue-gray scales that caught the light like polished stone. His 4 eyes moved independently, scanning the humans with the kind of attention a scientist might give to an interesting specimen. When he spoke, his voice carried through the chamber without amplification, a trick of the room's design that made every word feel like it was being spoken directly into the listener's mind. You stand before the Galactic Council as representatives of a species that has only just discovered faster-than-light travel, Tharn said. You arrive in our territory without permission. You establish colonies on worlds that fall under our jurisdiction. You refuse our lawful summons not once but 3 times. And now you come here and expect what, exactly? Welcome. Elena did not answer immediately. She had learned from her diplomatic training that silence could be a tool, and that the council expected new species to rush into excuses. Instead, she waited 3 full seconds, then spoke in a clear voice that did not waver. We expect to be treated as equals, she said. We came here to talk, not to bow. A ripple of sound moved through the chamber. Some of it was surprise. Some of it was amusement. A few of the council members leaned forward, suddenly more interested than they had been a moment before. Tharn's eyes focused all at once on Elena, a gesture that among his people signaled disapproval. Equals, he repeated as if tasting the word. You are a species of barely 8 billion individuals on a single planet. Your technology is primitive. Your military consists of ships we could destroy with a thought. Your understanding of galactic law is non-existent. And yet you believe you are our equals? Elena met his gaze without flinching. We don't measure equality by how many guns we have, she said. We measure it by what we're willing to stand for. Tharn was silent for a moment. Then he gestured to one of the floating displays that surrounded the platform. It lit up with an image of Earth, blue and green and fragile against the black of space. This is your world, Tharn said. Beautiful. Vulnerable. Do you know how many species have stood where you stand now and made the same mistake you are making? Dozens. Perhaps hundreds. They believed their principles mattered more than power. They believed their courage would protect them. He paused. They were wrong. The display changed. Now it showed a different planet, gray and lifeless, its surface scarred with craters that glowed faintly with residual radiation. This was the homeworld of the VRNN, Tharn continued. They refused to accept council law. They believed as you do that they could negotiate as equals. The council gave them 1 cycle to reconsider. They refused. The council made an example of them. He turned back to Elena. There are no VRNN anymore. Elena felt a cold weight settle in her chest, but she did not look away from the image. She had known this was coming. Every report Earth had received about the council mentioned the VRNN. It was the story the council told to every new species, the warning that was supposed to break resistance before it could form. We know about the VRNN, Elena said quietly. We studied what happened to them. We mourned them. And yet you still refuse to comply? Tharn asked. You still believe you can stand against us? We believe, Elena said, that you're making a mistake. Tharn's expression did not change, but several of the council members shifted in their seats. One of them, a slender being covered in fine silver fur, leaned toward another and whispered something too quiet for the humans to hear. A mistake, Tharn said slowly. Explain. Elena took a breath. This was the moment she had prepared for, the argument she had rehearsed 100 times on the journey to the council station. You've controlled the galaxy for 3,000 years, she said. You've built your power on fear and overwhelming force. Every species you meet you give the same choice, submit or die. And it works. It's worked for millennia. But it only works if the species you threaten believes you're willing to follow through. We are willing to follow through, Tharn said coldly. The VRNN learned that. Maybe, Elena said. Or maybe the VRNN were a special case. Maybe they were the one example you needed to keep everyone else in line. Because if you destroy every species that refuses you, eventually you run out of species. Eventually the galaxy is empty except for you and the ones too broken to resist. Tharn's eyes narrowed. You think we would hesitate to destroy Earth? I think, Elena said carefully, that you don't want to. Because every time you do it, you prove that the only thing holding the Council together is violence. And that makes every species in this chamber wonder if they're next. The silence that followed was different from before. It was heavier, tighter, like the air before a storm. Elena could feel the attention of every being in the room focused on her, could sense the calculations happening behind dozens of pairs of eyes. Finally, Tharn spoke again and his voice was quieter than before, almost gentle. You are clever, he said. But cleverness is not strength. And strength is all that matters here. He gestured, and the display changed once more, now showing a fleet of Council warships, hundreds of them, their hulls dark and bristling with weapons. We will give you the same choice we gave the VRYNN. One standard cycle. Return to Earth, present our terms to your leaders and accept Council law. Or refuse and face the consequences. Elena looked at the fleet then back at Tharn. And if we need more time? You do not, Tharn said. One cycle. That is all. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to push back, but she could see in Tharn's expression that the decision was final. The Council had made its move. Now it was Earth's turn. We'll deliver your message, Elena said. See that you do, Tharn replied. He gestured toward the chamber doors, a clear dismissal. You are free to leave. The three humans turned and walked toward the exit, their footsteps echoing in the vast space. Elena kept her pace steady, her posture straight, refusing to show the fear that was coiling in her stomach. Behind her, she could hear the Council members beginning to talk among themselves, their voices low and satisfied. They thought they had won. They thought Earth would fold. They were wrong. Elena reached the door and stepped through into the corridor beyond. As soon as the door sealed behind them, her diplomatic officer let out a shaky breath. That went about as badly as we expected, he said. Actually, Elena said, it went exactly as we planned. Her engineer looked at her sharply. Captain? Elena allowed herself a small, tight smile. They gave us a cycle, she said. That's all we needed. She pulled a small communication device from her pocket and activated it with a touch. The message she sent was brief, just 3 words, but they carried the weight of everything Earth had been preparing for in secret. Initiate Protocol Sentinel. Somewhere in the depths of space, hidden in the shadow of a dead moon, a relay station received the signal. It processed the authentication codes, confirmed the source, and began transmitting to a network that stretched across dozens of systems. The message was simple: the Council has made its move. Now we make ours. And across the galaxy, in places the Council had never thought to look, humanity's real response began to wake up. The message reached Earth 17 hours after Elena sent it. By the time it arrived, the planet was already moving. In Geneva, the United Earth Council convened in an emergency session that had been planned 6 months in advance. Every nation had a representative present, either in person or through secure holographic link. There were no cameras, no press, no observers. What happened in that room would not be made public until long after the crisis had passed, if ever. Secretary-General Sarah Chin stood at the center of the chamber and looked at the faces around her. Some were frightened. Some were angry. A few looked grimly satisfied, as if they had been waiting for this moment and were relieved it had finally come. The Council has given us 1 cycle to surrender, Chin said. That gives us 26 days by Earth's calendar. They expect us to panic. They expect us to beg. They expect us to break. She paused. We're going to give them something else. She activated the main display, and a star map appeared, showing Earth at the center and spreading outward in a web of lines and markers that most of the representatives had never seen before. For the past 18 years, Chin continued, ever since we achieved faster-than-light travel, we have been preparing for this exact scenario. We knew the Council existed. We knew their history. We knew what they did to species that refused to submit. And we decided that if we were going to enter the galaxy, we would do it on our own terms. She gestured and the map zoomed in on one of the markers. It showed a system 40 light-years from Earth, uninhabited and unremarkable except for the massive construction that floated in orbit around its 4th planet. This is Bastion Station, Chin said. The first of 7 deep space facilities we've built in secret over the last decade. Each one is designed to be self-sufficient, heavily defended, and capable of supporting a population of 50,000 in the event that Earth becomes uninhabitable. The council doesn't know they exist. They didn't think to look for them because they assumed we were too primitive to build anything they couldn't see. Another gesture, and the map shifted to show a different kind of marker, these ones scattered throughout council space in systems that appeared completely empty. These are sensor drones, Chin said. We've deployed over 6,000 of them in the last 8 years, disguised as debris, asteroids and failed satellites. They've been watching council movements, recording their patrol routes, monitoring their communications. We know where their fleets are. We know their response times. We know which systems they consider critical and which ones they ignore. A representative from the African Union leaned forward. You're talking about espionage on a galactic scale, she said. If the council discovers this. They already have discovered it, Chin said. Or they will very soon. That's part of the plan. The room went silent. Chin let the words settle before she continued. The council's power is based on perception, she said. They make themselves seem invincible, all-knowing, unstoppable. Every species they encounter sees the same overwhelming force, the same terrible certainty. And because everyone believes the council cannot be resisted, no one tries. She looked around the chamber. We're going to shatter that perception. The display changed again, this time showing a detailed tactical map of the council's primary fleet positions. In 6 hours, Chin said, we're going to execute the largest coordinated information operation in human history. Every sensor drone we've deployed will activate simultaneously and broadcast a single message to every inhabited system within council space. The message will contain proof of what we've been doing. Locations of our hidden stations, recordings of council fleet movements, evidence of our surveillance network. We're going to show the entire galaxy that the council has been watched, studied, and predicted by a species they considered primitive. You're deliberately provoking them, someone said. You're inviting them to attack. Yes, Chin said simply. Because we want them to attack now while they're overconfident and unprepared, rather than later when they've had time to study us. We want them to come at us with the same arrogance they showed Elena. And we want every other species in the galaxy to watch what happens when they do. She pulled up another image, this one showing a sleek ship unlike anything the council had in their fleets. It was smaller than a council warship, but its hull was covered in overlapping plates of some dark material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. This is the UESS Defiant, Chin said. The first of a new class of warship we've been building in secret. It's not designed to match council ships in firepower. It's designed to be faster, more maneuverable, and nearly impossible to detect until it's too late. We have 23 of them operational, with 40 more in final production. 23 ships against a fleet of hundreds? Someone asked. That's suicide. It would be, Chin agreed, if we were planning to fight them in open battle. But we're not. She zoomed the display to show the Defiant's interior systems. Each of these ships is equipped with quantum displacement drives that allow for microjumps in and out of FTL. They can appear, strike, and vanish before the enemy can lock weapons. They carry experimental weapons we've developed based on theoretical physics the Council hasn't explored in millennia. And they're crewed by volunteers who understand exactly what they're signing up for. She paused, letting that sink in. Our strategy is simple, Chin said. We make the Council commit their fleet to an assault on our positions. We bleed them with hit-and-run attacks that they can't counter. We make them look weak in front of every species that's watching. And while they're focused on trying to destroy us, we activate the second part of the plan. The display shifted once more, and this time it showed something that made several representatives draw in sharp breaths. It was a network of communication relays spreading across dozens of systems, all of them connected to a central hub. For the last 5 years, Chin said, we've been making quiet contact with species under Council rule. Not the governments, not the official channels, but the dissidents, the rebels, the ones who never fully submitted. We've offered them technology, resources, and something the Council never gave them, hope. There are 47 species in that network now, and they're ready to move. You're starting a galactic rebellion, someone said, and their voice was filled with awe and horror in equal measure. We're giving the galaxy a choice, Chin corrected. The same choice we were given. Submit or fight. The Council has been using that threat for 3,000 years. Now we're going to show everyone that fight is actually an option. A representative from the Asian coalition spoke up, his voice careful. And if this fails? If the Council crushes us and makes an example of Earth the way they did with the VRNN? Chin met his eyes. Then at least 47 other species will know the truth. They'll know that someone tried. They'll know that the Council can be resisted even if we don't survive. And eventually someone else will try again. She paused. But we're not planning to fail. She deactivated the display and looked around the chamber one more time. In 26 days, she said, the Council expects to receive our surrender. Instead, they're going to receive a war unlike any they've fought in their entire history. Not a war of fleets and planets, but a war of information, perception, and will. We're going to make them question everything they thought they knew about power. And we're going to do it with every resource we have, every ally we've made, and every bit of courage our species can muster. She placed her hands on the podium in front of her. The vote is simple, she said. Do we execute Protocol Sentinel and commit humanity to this path, knowing the risks? Or do we accept Council terms and hope they're merciful? The vote took less than 5 minutes. When it was done, the result was unanimous. Protocol Sentinel was a go. Across Earth, military installations went to full alert. The Bastion stations received their activation codes and began bringing their defensive systems online. The USS Defiant and her sister ships started their pre-combat checks and plotted jump coordinates to their first strike positions. And on 1,000 different worlds throughout Council space, quiet messages reached waiting hands. Messages that said, it's time. Be ready. In his quarters aboard the Council flagship Eternal Judgment, Speaker Tharn received a report from his intelligence division. It was marked urgent, and when he read it, his 4 eyes widened slightly. The humans had activated some kind of surveillance network. Thousands of hidden sensors throughout Council space, all broadcasting simultaneously. The sheer scale of it was staggering. The audacity was almost impressive. Tharn set the report aside and allowed himself a thin smile. The humans thought they were clever. They thought they could frighten the Council with espionage and hidden stations. They thought they could inspire rebellion. They would learn their mistakes soon enough. He composed a message to the Council Fleet Admiralty. Accelerate the timetable. We move on Earth in 10 days. Let the humans have their moment of defiance. It would make their submission all the sweeter. But as Tharn sent the order and settled back in his chair, he did not notice the small anomaly in his ship's sensor logs. A brief flicker of something that appeared and vanished in less than a second 40,000 kilometers off the starboard bow. If he had noticed it, he might have recognized it for what it was. A human ship testing its displacement drive against Council sensors. A human ship that had just proven it could get within weapons range without being detected. The war hadn't started yet. But the first move had already been made. The Council fleet arrived at Earth 9 days later, exactly 1 day ahead of their announced deadline. It was a deliberate choice, meant to catch the humans off guard and unprepared. Speaker Tharn watched from the bridge of the Eternal Judgment as 200 warships dropped out of FTL at the edge of Earth's solar system, their formations perfect, their weapons primed. It was the largest show of force the Council had assembled in over a century. It should have been enough to make any species surrender immediately. Tharn's communication officer looked up from her station. We're receiving a transmission from Earth, she said. Audio only. Put it through, Tharn said. The voice that came through the speakers was calm, almost conversational. Tharn recognized it as belonging to the human captain who had stood before the Council. Speaker Tharn, Elena Vasquez said. You're early. We weren't expecting you for another day. Surrender now, Tharn said, and we will consider reducing the sanctions against your world. Resist, and Earth will share the fate of the VRN. There was a pause. Then Elena spoke again, and Tharn could hear something in her voice that might have been amusement. You know, she said, we spent a lot of time studying what happened to the VRYN. We read every record we could find, analyzed every battle report, tried to understand how a species with their level of technology could be eliminated so completely. Another pause. And we found something interesting. Tharn felt a flicker of unease, but he kept his voice steady. And what was that? The VRN fought you the way you expected them to fight, Elena said. They met your fleets with their own fleets. They defended their worlds with static defenses. They played by rules that you wrote, and they lost because those rules were designed to make sure you always win. Her voice hardened slightly. We're not going to make that mistake. You have no fleet to speak of, Tharn said. You have no defenses that could stop us. Whatever you think you've prepared, it will not be enough. Maybe, Elena said. But you're about to find out. The transmission ended. Tharn stared at the empty comm channel for a moment, then turned to his tactical officer. Scan the system. Find their defensive installations and target them for immediate destruction. The officer worked his console for several seconds, then looked up with a confused expression. Sir, I'm not detecting any major defensive platforms. Earth's orbital infrastructure is minimal. There are some satellites, some small stations, but nothing that would pose a threat to the fleet. They're hiding something, Tharn said. Expand the scan. Check for cloaked vessels, hidden weapons platforms, anything that... The ship's alarms began to scream. Multiple contacts appearing throughout the fleet, the tactical officer shouted. They're inside our formation. On the main display, Tharn watched as 23 small ships materialized out of nowhere, scattered among the council vessels like predators appearing in a herd. They were dark, angular, and moving impossibly fast. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Tharn ordered. Target those vessels and... The human ships opened fire. They didn't use the kind of energy weapons the council was familiar with. Instead, they launched projectiles that moved at a significant fraction of light speed, physical rounds that punched through energy shields as if they weren't there. 3 council warships were crippled in the first 5 seconds, their hulls torn open by weapons that shouldn't have been able to penetrate their defenses. The council ships tried to return fire, but the human vessels were already gone, vanishing into microjumps before the targeting systems could lock on. They reappeared seconds later in different positions, fired again and vanished once more. It was like fighting ghosts. How are they doing this? Tharn demanded. Our sensors should detect any FTL activation. Their drives are using some kind of quantum displacement we've never seen before, the science officer reported, her voice tight with stress. They're not actually entering normal FTL space. They're shifting between dimensional layers. Our sensors weren't designed to track that kind of movement. Another alarm. Another council ship took damage, its engines exploding in a cascade of brilliant light. Tharn forced himself to think past the shock and anger. The humans were good, better than he had expected, but they only had 23 ships. His fleet had 200. Even with their technological advantage, they couldn't win a sustained engagement. Order all vessels to activate defensive spheres, he commanded. Overlapping fields. Nothing gets through without triggering a detection grid. If they appear anywhere near us, we'll see them. The council ships began to adjust their formations, creating interlocking sensor webs that would make the human hit-and-run tactics much more difficult. And then the second phase of humanity's plan activated. On 47 different worlds throughout council space, the rebellions began. They started small. A sabotaged power grid here. A destroyed communications relay there. Acts of resistance that individually meant nothing, but together created a cascade of disruptions that spread across the council's territory like wildfire. On the industrial world of Cathis Prime, workers in the orbital factories suddenly stopped production and sealed themselves inside, demanding independence. On Varn, a council administrative center, the entire planetary network crashed simultaneously, taking with it decades of carefully maintained control systems. On Thessar, the local militia turned their weapons on the council garrison and declared their world free. Each incident was small. Each one could have been contained. But there were dozens of them, happening at the same time, coordinated with a precision that the council had never seen from subject species. In the council chamber, the emergency session was chaos. Representatives from a dozen worlds were shouting for military support, for reinforcements, for guidance on how to respond to uprisings that seemed to have appeared from nowhere. And in the middle of it all, a broadcast began. It came through every communication channel in council space simultaneously, bypassing security protocols and overriding priority systems. The message was simple, just a few minutes long, but it was the most devastating thing the council had faced in 3,000 years. It was a human woman speaking, standing in front of a star map that showed the entire galaxy. People of the council's domain, she said, and her voice was transmitted in 400 different languages at once. My name is Sarah Chin and I speak for humanity. For 3,000 years, you have been told that the council is invincible. That resistance is impossible. That the only choice you have is obedience or death. She paused, and the star map behind her changed, showing footage of human ships engaging council vessels, outmaneuvering them, damaging them. We are here to show you that this is a lie, Chin continued. The council is not invincible. They can be surprised. They can be outmaneuvered. They can be resisted. And most importantly, they can be beaten. Another pause. We do not ask you to join us. We do not demand that you fight. We only ask that you watch and remember what you see. Remember that when humanity was threatened with extinction, we did not bow. We did not beg. We fought. And whatever happens to Earth, whatever the Council does to us, the truth will remain. They bled. They struggled. They were afraid. The broadcast ended, but the damage was done. Across the galaxy, on thousands of worlds, billions of beings had just watched a Council fleet get hurt by a species the Council had dismissed as primitive. The perception of invincibility was shattered. Back in Earth's solar system, Tharn was receiving reports of the rebellions, the broadcast, the chaos spreading through Council space. He could feel his careful plans unraveling, could sense the momentum shifting away from him. "Enough of this," he said quietly. "Target Earth directly. All weapons. Prepare to demonstrate what happens to species that defy the Council." His tactical officer hesitated. "Sir, if we destroy Earth now while the entire galaxy is watching, then the entire galaxy will see what happens to rebels," Tharn snapped. "Fire." The Council fleet opened fire on Earth, hundreds of energy weapons converging on the blue-green planet. And that was when the third phase activated. Around Earth, space itself seemed to ripple. Enormous defensive satellites that hadn't existed a moment before suddenly appeared, their generators creating shields that absorbed the Council's attack. But these weren't ordinary shields. They were built using technology that humanity had developed in secret, based on theoretical physics that the Council had abandoned centuries ago. The shields held every shot, every weapon. The entire Council bombardment washed across Earth's defenses like water against stone. Tharn stared at the display in disbelief. "How?" "Sir, we're detecting massive power signatures throughout the system," the science officer said. "They've been hiding installations in dimensional pockets. They're bringing them online now." And they were. Orbital weapons platforms. Fighter launch bays. Defensive installations that had been built over years and hidden using the same quantum displacement technology as the human warships. Earth hadn't been undefended. It had been waiting. The human ships regrouped, now supported by dozens of smaller fighters that poured out of hidden stations. They didn't attack recklessly. They were methodical, surgical, striking at Council ships that were isolated or damaged, avoiding direct confrontation with the main fleet. Tharn realized with growing horror that the humans weren't trying to destroy his fleet. They were trying to make it look weak. They were putting on a show for the entire galaxy, demonstrating that the Council could be challenged. "Fall back," he ordered. "Withdraw to rally point 7 and regroup." "Sir, if we retreat?" "I said fall back." Tharn's voice was sharp. "This engagement is a trap. They want us to commit everything here while their rebellions tear apart our territory. We need to consolidate our forces and deal with the larger threat." The Council fleet began to withdraw, executing a fighting retreat that the human ships harried but did not try to prevent. They had made their point. They had shown the galaxy what they wanted to show. As the last Council ship jumped to FTL, Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the USS Defiant and watched them go. Around her, her crew was exhausted, running on adrenaline and determination. They had lost 6 ships in the engagement, over 300 people dead. The cost had been terrible. But they had won the battle that mattered. "Captain," her communications officer said, "we're receiving messages from over 200 different systems. Some of them are requesting asylum. Some are asking for technological support. Some are just asking if we're really going to keep fighting." Elena thought about that for a moment. She thought about the people they had lost, about the ships burning in the black, about the long war that was still ahead of them. "Tell them yes," she said. "Tell them humanity keeps its promises. Tell them we're going to fight until the Council learns what every bully eventually learns, that there's always someone who refuses to be afraid." In the days that followed, the galaxy learned new words. Humanity. Resistance. Hope. The Council tried to contain the damage, tried to crush the rebellions one by one, but the spark had been lit and it was spreading faster than they could move. Species that had submitted for centuries were questioning their obedience. Worlds that had been loyal were demanding negotiations. The war lasted for years. It was brutal, costly, and there were times when humanity came close to losing everything. But they were never alone. The network they had built held strong, and more species joined the resistance with each passing month. In the end, the Council didn't fall in a single dramatic moment. It crumbled slowly, piece by piece, as more and more of the galaxy chose freedom over fear. And Earth, the small blue world that had refused to bow, became a symbol. Not of military might or technological superiority, but of something simpler and more powerful. The refusal to surrender in the face of impossible odds. Captain Elena Vasquez lived to see the end of the Council's reign. She was an old woman by then, decorated by a dozen different species, celebrated as one of the architects of galactic freedom. When reporters asked her how humanity had managed to defeat an empire that had ruled for 3,000 years, she always gave the same answer. "We didn't defeat them," she would say. "We just showed the galaxy that they could be defeated. After that, everyone else did the rest." It was a lesson the galaxy would not forget. And it started with 3 humans standing in a council chamber, refusing to be afraid. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check.